We will have borrowed more money in the last year than we did in the previous 200 years. That's a pretty amazing statistic. We are in uncharted territory when it comes to debt right now. This is what I call fiscal child abuse, what we are doing right now. We're literally robbing from our children and grandchildren. And those are the kinds of things that we are confronting right now. Too much money creation, too much spending, and too much debt. Now, you all ask me, don't depress people, don't depress you. So I want to end on this very optimistic note. This isn't going to last long. I have been around the country. I was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin yesterday for a conservative gathering, this group of Americans for Prosperity. They had 800 people out, 800 people on a Saturday afternoon, and these people, folks, were mad as hell. There is something going around in this country. People are just infuriated. What I've never seen, I don't know if you feel the same way. I mean, how many of you are just raging mad right now with what's going on in Washington? And you are not alone. People are infuriated. And I think if this doesn't work, and look, this program isn't going to work. Government spending is a de-stimulus for the economy. It's not a stimulus. Then people are going to say, what comes next? And that's when I think we get back to good economics. If you know what's a tragedy? For the $1 trillion that we spent on this mad quote, stimulus bill, for $1 trillion, we could have completely eliminated the income tax for a year. You want to see this economy? You want to see this economy roar back to life? Get rid of the income tax for the rest of the year. You'll see so many jobs in this country, it'll be unbelievable. Now, I think what we ought to do is just, and I'll end with this, 2 quick fixes. They're big ideas, but they're exactly what needs 3 things. 1, flat tax, the Steve Forbes flat tax. I mean, this is just such a no-brainer. Can you imagine how many jobs we could create in this country? If we had an 18% flat tax with no deductions, no capital gains tax, no dividend tax, no death tax, all this stuff. I mean, it would be an unbelievable stimulus to the economy. We would have so many jobs in this country. People would swim here, they'd tunnel here, they'd parachute in here, they'd do whatever they could to get all the jobs we got. That's number 1. Number 2, I love this idea that a lot of the Republicans are now talking about a spending freeze. Just freeze spending now for the next 10 years until we balance this budget. And third, and this is something new to me. I didn't believe in this before. We need to go back to a gold standard. We really do. I mean, our monetary policy is so out of control right now. The politicians and the people at the Fed have so screwed up. We have got to get that anchor. So, Ronald Reagan said this over and over again. I'm going to make the dollar as good as gold again. If you look at what the big failure of the Bush presidency, when he entered office, the price of gold was $300 an ounce. When he left office, the price of gold was $1,000 an ounce. That's a tripling in the price of gold, which means that the dollar and our currency has been devalued over this period, and I believe that's what caused this crisis. So we are going to get out of this. I really believe Americans, I think you're going to see a revolt against these policies. And I worked for Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey in 1993 and 1994. I always tell people, the most fun I ever had in American politics was those 2 years. Because after Clinton got his tax increase through, and then he did, the gays in the military, all this stuff, it was conservatives who were back running that town. I think that's good. These guys are going to run out of gas. I really believe that's going to happen in the next 3 or 4 months. But what it means is we need groups like yours, we need Cato, we need Heritage, we need to fight like crazy, and we've got to stop them now. Because if they are able to implement cap and trade and national health care and all these things, it gets impossible to get rid of these things, right? So keep fighting, because we're going to win. And I will stop there, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Well, that's a great question. I'm a big admirer of Newt's, by the way. I remember when I was working with Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey in 1994. I'll never forget this. Just kind of a side story. I was working for actually Dick Armey, and he was sort of the lieutenant, and Newt was the general. And I remember it was the summer of 1994, and I said to Dick, I said, I'm leaving. I'm going back to Cato because I just can't stand this anymore. I said, Dick, you're a great boss, but being in the minority in the House after 50 years of Democratic control, it was like they just, steamrolled over us. And he said, I remember, he said, Steve, don't leave now because we're going to take the House back in November. And I just said, Dick, I want whatever you're smoking, because it just seemed so improbable. But it happened because people were you just had this huge backlash against what was going on. So I think it can happen again. There's a couple problems. One is we don't have a Newt Gingrich, because whether you love Newt or hate him, and my feeling about Newt is this guy who has 10 ideas, and 5 of them are great, 2 of them are stupid, 3 of them are unachievable, but those great ideas are really great. And I don't see anybody of that caliber out there right now, but we've got some really good people. Mike Pence of Indiana, really smart guy. And, I really like Paul Ryan of Wisconsin. I don't know if you know Jeff Flake of Arizona. So we do have talent in the House. The problem, though, that we have as conservatives is we could make the case in '94. Give us a chance. You know, you haven't given Republicans a chance for 50 years. Let us show what we can do. And those first 2 years of Republican rule, we did a lot. We balanced the budget. Nothing makes me angrier than when Bill Clinton says he balanced the budget. I was worried. You remember that? Bill Clinton vetoed our budget down 3 times before we finally got him to sign a balanced budget. Now, then he took credit for it. We did welfare reform, which was one of the most important social policy changes we made in this country. We cut the number of people on welfare by 50% in 4 years. That was one of the greatest achievements in public policy history, and it happened because of those welfare reforms, where we basically said, work for welfare, basically. You know what? What's a tragedy? You know what they did in the stimulus bill? They just reversed all the, you don't have to work for welfare anymore. So when we move people out of welfare into work, the Democrats are moving people out of work into welfare. The problem is it's a little harder for Republicans to say, give us power and we'll do all the right things, because people are going to say, hey, we just gave you guys power and you screwed up. This is the problem. I mean, there is a lot of brand damage. And this is why I think it's so important. We need new faces for the party right now. We really do. We need a new crop of people who are, I like Sarah Palin. I think people like that who can shine a new face, who are not associated with the failures of the Republican past, are what are needed. And I think people like Paul Ryan and the guy from Indiana, Mike Pence, are superstars. Yeah, in the back.
You have a slide on Amazon. What was it about?
I went through that. It's just, I'll show you. I think I have that in here. The point I was making with this, actually it is a good point. I kind of went over this, but, okay. Okay, let me just show you this first. People, this is relevant to the current debate. People think we've never been through anything like this before. I mean, my God, the mortgage market melted down, we had a big bubble, and this has never happened before we had this collapse in the stock market. That ain't true. That happened in 1999 and 2000, right? How many of you remember the dot-com bubble, right? This is the dot-com bubble, right, Dan? I mean, look at this. This is the NASDAQ, and these are high technology and mostly dot-com stocks. And people forget that in 2000, under Bill Clinton, under that wonderful Clinton economy, that the market hits the NASDAQ hits its high at 5,049 in late 2000. By the time Bush takes office, by the end of 2002, it's at 1,100. It hit a low at 1,100. This is the liquidation of $6 trillion of wealth. So yeah, this was a bubble bursting. And what does Bush do in response to this? He did one really, really smart thing. He did the capital gains, dividend, and income tax cuts. And when he did that, you could see that the market really responded. And the reason I have this chart is Amazon. It just shows you kind of how irrational things got. At its height, Amazon, when it was worth $106 a share, the value of Amazon, the market capitalization of Amazon, was greater than the value of every book that had ever been printed since the printing press was invented. So it shows you what happens when you get this irrational exuberance. But you can see once we do the tax cuts, the market really recovers. In fact, I'll show you this on the bigger, because this is an important point. We can get out of this if we do the right things. I mean, look, you see the stock market collapse up there at the time, and then, once we do the tax cuts, that's why when Obama keeps saying we did tax cuts, they don't work. They did work. They worked in 2003. They worked in 1981. They worked in 1963. That was the Kennedy tax cut. Remember? Kennedy cut the top tax rate from 90% to 70%, and we had a boom. Look at what happened to the stock market after the Kennedy tax cuts. And, Kennedy said something that I don't think virtually any Democrat in Washington believes today. He said, when tax rates are too high, we'll never get enough jobs and we'll never get enough revenue to balance the budget. And he was so right about that. He really was kind of the first supply center. So that's the reason I had that chart in there.